I remember the first time I met Emily, standing by her rusty sedan with a nervous smile, her hands twisting the hem of her dress. I was covered in grease and frustration after wrestling with a particularly stubborn transmission, and yet, she smiled at me like I was someone worth noticing. Back then, I had no idea how much trouble that smile would bring. We were high school sweethearts, Emily and I. We shared everything: dreams of a little house with a white picket fence, talks about kids, late-night drives with the windows down and music up. She was the sun in my sky, and I was certain I'd spend my life chasing her light. After the wedding, life settled into a rhythm. I took over my father's auto shop, and Emily worked at the small law office in town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. But something shifted about a year ago. It started small: her phone buzzing late at night, whispers into the receiver, her laughter soft but strange. I told myself it was nothing. I was just being paranoid. After all, Emily wasn't that kind of woman. Then came the late nights at the office, the dinners gone cold on the table, and the vague explanations that never quite satisfied. We stopped talking about our days, about anything that mattered. The space in our bed seemed to grow wider with every passing night. I tried to bridge it: flowers, date nights, making her breakfast in bed on Sundays, but she seemed to float further away. One evening, I got a call that our shop's delivery truck had broken down on the outskirts of town. I rolled up my sleeves and took my toolbox, figuring I'd be back in time to surprise Emily with takeout from her favorite Thai place. But as I drove through the main street, I caught a glimpse of her car parked outside Jake's garage, the one across town that I'd never step foot in if my life depended on it. At first, I laughed at myself. She'd mentioned her brakes were making a weird noise, and I hadn't gotten around to fixing them. I almost kept driving. Almost. But something about the way the lights inside were dimmed, the closed sign hanging lopsided, made my stomach turn. I pulled over across the street and killed the engine, trying to convince myself I wasn't being ridiculous. My heart drummed in my ears, drowning out reason. After what felt like hours, the door swung open. Emily stepped out, smoothing her dress, her cheeks flushed and her hair a little too messy to blame on the wind. Then came Jake, the guy I used to drink with on Friday nights until he opened that garage and we stopped being friends. He leaned in, too familiar, brushing a thumb across her cheek before kissing her. The kind of kiss that spoke of routine, not recklessness. I couldn't move. Couldn't think. I just stared as my whole world burned down in front of me. By the time I found the strength to drive home, my hands were trembling so bad I could barely keep the truck on the road. When Emily got back that night, she smelled like engine oil and someone else's cologne. She smiled at me, easy and sweet, and said she was sorry for being late, that her boss had kept her with last-minute files. I couldn't speak. I just stared at the woman I'd loved for 10 years and wondered who the hell she really was. That night, I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling and counting the cracks, wondering how long it had been going on. Wondering how blind I had to be to miss it. And more than that, I wondered what I was supposed to do now that I knew. When dawn bled through the curtains, I hadn't slept a minute. But I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I needed proof, something I could hold on to when she tried to twist the truth. So I kissed her goodbye that morning, just like always, and told her I loved her. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but I smiled through it. As she drove off to work, I picked up my phone and called a friend who owed me a favor. If Emily was keeping secrets, I was about to learn every single one of them. A week passed with me pretending everything was fine, even as it felt like my world was crumbling from the inside out. I forced myself to get up, go to work, share beers with the guys at Riley's bar on Fridays, and kiss Emily on the cheek every morning like I hadn't seen her pressed against Jake in the shadows of his garage. Meanwhile, my friend Mike, a retired cop turned private investigator, was out there gathering proof of what I already knew in my gut. When he finally called, his voice was grim. "You sure you want to see this, man?" he asked. "Send it," I said, the words coming out steadier than I felt. A minute later, my phone buzzed. Photos and videos. Emily's car parked behind Jake's shop. Emily in his arms, her smile wide and eyes bright, the kind of smile she hadn't aimed at me in over a year. Each image felt like a punch to the gut, but I couldn't stop scrolling. Couldn't stop looking at the truth, raw and undeniable. There was a video, too. I almost couldn't bring myself to tap on it, but I needed to know just how deep the knife had been buried. It was grainy, shot from behind the half-closed garage door, but the audio was clear enough. Jake's voice low and cocky, Emily's laugh soft and breathless. I dropped the phone halfway through, bile rising in my throat. I spent the rest of the day in the shop, alone, the phone face down on the workbench. I ripped through brake repairs and oil changes with a kind of mechanical precision, my hands moving on autopilot while my mind spun. The guys at the shop threw me worried looks, but they knew better than to ask. When I finally went home that night, the house was dark and empty. Emily had left a note on the kitchen counter, something about working late again. I crumpled it without reading the rest and poured a double shot of whiskey, letting it burn all the way down. It was after midnight when I heard her car in the driveway. I stayed in my armchair, staring at the blank TV screen, listening to her key scrape in the lock and the click of her heels on the hardwood. She paused in the doorway to the living room when she saw me, eyes wide. "Oh," she said, her voice light but brittle. "You're still up?" "Couldn't sleep," I said, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. The lie came easy now, second nature. She lingered in the doorway, one hand twisting the strap of her purse. For a second, I almost asked her right there, with the whiskey warm in my veins and my heart still raw. Almost asked how long she'd been sneaking off to Jake's garage, lying to my face, sleeping in my bed with his scent clinging to her skin. But I bit my tongue and smiled, and she relaxed, drifting closer. She pressed a kiss to my cheek, quick and guilty. "I'm sorry it got so late," she murmured. "You should get some rest." I watched her go, the sway of her hips in that red dress I'd bought her last Christmas, the one she'd never worn for me. She paused at the foot of the stairs, glancing back, waiting for me to follow. But I stayed put, clutching the empty glass so hard my knuckles ached. "I'll be up in a bit," I said, voice even. She hesitated, biting her lip, then nodded and disappeared upstairs. The next morning, I called Mike and told him to keep digging. I needed to know how far the rot had spread, if it was just Jake or if there was more I didn't see. Mike didn't ask questions, just grunted and hung up. Over the next few days, I gathered pieces of Emily's betrayal like shards of broken glass, careful not to cut myself too deep. Receipts for hotel rooms in town, her texts with Jake, photos of them tucked into the shadows behind his garage. She was good at covering her tracks, but not good enough. By the end of the week, I had a manila envelope full of evidence and a hole in my chest where my heart used to be. I stared at it for a long time, flipping through photos and printed text messages until the words blurred together. On Friday night, I pulled into the driveway just as Emily was leaving. She froze in the open garage, her keys dangling from her fingers and her eyes wide. For a second, I thought she might run. "You headed out?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay light. She faltered, glancing back at her car. "Yeah, just meeting some of the girls for drinks," she said, too quickly. I smiled, slow and careful. "Have fun," I said, stepping aside. "Don't wait up." She hesitated, biting her lip. For a second, I thought she might confess, might break down and tell me everything, save me from having to rip the words out of her myself. But she just smiled, shaky and bright, and slid into the car without looking back. I watched her taillights disappear down the street, my hands trembling at my sides. Then I climbed into my truck and followed, headlights off and heart pounding in my throat. She didn't go to the bar. I hadn't expected her to. Her car turned left at the light, heading out past the edge of town to the squat brick building with the flickering open sign and the smell of gasoline and lies. I parked a few blocks down, killed the engine, and stared at the darkened windows of Jake's garage. My fingers drummed restlessly on the steering wheel. I could see her silhouette inside, slender and nervous, moving toward the broad-shouldered figure by the workbench. I should have walked in, should have kicked down the door and dragged her out, should have made Jake eat his teeth right there on the oil-stained concrete. But I didn't. I just sat there in the dark, watching my whole life unravel one thread at a time. When she finally came back out, hair mussed, lipstick smudged, I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. She didn't see me, didn't even glance in my direction. Just climbed into her car and drove home like she hadn't torn my heart out and left it bleeding on the shop floor. I waited until she was gone. Then I got out of the truck, crossed the street, and pounded on the door. It swung open, and Jake's grin faltered the second he saw me. "Tom," he said, his voice tight. "Didn't expect to see you here." I smiled, slow and deadly. "We need to talk," I said, stepping inside and letting the door swing shut behind me. Jake's smirk flickered when I stepped inside, the door swinging shut with a dull thud that echoed through the empty garage. The smell of burnt oil and old rubber clung to the air, thick and sour. For a second, neither of us moved. He shifted his weight, wiping his hands on a grease-stained rag, trying to play it cool. But I saw the flicker of nerves in his eyes, the way his fingers tightened around the rag. "Tom," he started, forcing a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Something wrong with the truck?" I didn't smile. Didn't blink. Just stared at him until the grin slid off his face. I took a step forward, then another, watching as he backed up instinctively, one hand groping for the workbench behind him. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across his face. "Nah," I said, my voice flat. "The truck's fine. It's you and me that have a problem." He swallowed, Adam's apple bobbing. His eyes darted to the door, then back to me, calculating. I'd seen that look 100 times, coyotes cornered on the backroads, eyes wild and frantic, teeth bared and trembling. "Look, man," he said, holding up his hands. "Whatever you think's going on, it's not." "Don't," I snapped, and the word came out raw and vicious, sharper than I intended. He flinched, the rag dropping from his fingers, landing in an oil slick on the concrete. I took another step, the space between us shrinking. "Don't lie to me, Jake. I've seen the pictures. Got the videos too, if you want to deny it." His mouth opened, then snapped shut, guilt bleeding across his face. For a second, he just stared at me, jaw working, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill. "Tom, listen," he started, voice low and pleading. "It just happened, okay? I didn't mean for it to go this far." "We didn't." "How long?" I cut in, each word slow and deliberate. "What?" "How long?" I repeated, my voice dropping to a growl. "Has it been going on?" He hesitated, licking his lips. His eyes flickered to the door again, like he was sizing up his chances of making a break for it. But he must have seen something in my face that made him think better of it, because his shoulders sagged, and he let out a shaky breath. "About a year," he admitted finally, his voice small and pathetic. "Maybe a little longer." "A year." I clenched my fists until my nails bit into my palms, the pain a welcome distraction from the rage boiling under my skin. A whole year of lies. Of waking up beside Emily, of Sunday dinners at her parents' place, of I love yous whispered in the dark, all of it tainted and rotten. "And Jacob?" I forced out, the words scraping my throat raw. "My son?" Jake's eyes widened, guilt flaring bright and unmistakable. "Tom, she didn't say. But I already knew." I'd known the second I saw that first photo of them together, the way his arm draped around her waist, casual and possessive. The same way mine used to. The DNA test result was still folded in the glove compartment of my truck, the words seared into my memory. Not a match. The breath left me in a shudder, like I'd taken a punch to the gut. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, just stared at Jake's face, at the pathetic guilt clouding his eyes, and wondered how the hell it had come to this. "I should kill you," I whispered, and my voice didn't even sound like mine. He went white as a sheet, stumbling back until his hips hit the workbench, knocking over a can of WD-40 that clattered to the floor. "Jesus, Tom, don't listen, man, I never wanted to hurt you. She was unhappy, okay? She said you were never around, always working late at the shop. She needed someone, and I." "Shut up," I growled, and he snapped his mouth shut so fast I heard his teeth click. The words twisted like knives, each one cutting deeper. I took a breath, slow and shuddering, forcing the rage back down, caging it behind my teeth. I needed to think. Needed to figure out what came next, because if I let go now, I wasn't sure I'd stop. I turned, shoving a hand through my hair, pacing a tight line across the concrete. My heart was slamming against my ribs, too fast, too hard, drowning out reason.
Does she love you? I bit out finally, voice brittle. Or was it just for fun?
Jake flinched, guilt darkening his eyes.
Tom, man.
Answer me, I snarled, rounding on him. He hesitated, jaw clenched.
She said she didn't want to hurt you, he muttered.
Said she was confused.
That she loved you, but... I laughed then, short and broken. But what? I hissed. She loved me but couldn't keep her legs closed? He winced like I'd slapped him, but I didn't care.
I needed him to hurt, needed someone else to feel the agony twisting in my gut.
You're a coward, I spat, the words like venom. You couldn't even face me like a man. Sneaking around behind my back, pretending to be my friend, you disgust me. Tom, please, he pleaded, eyes wide and desperate. I'm sorry, okay? I'll end it.
I swear, just please, don't do something you'll regret. I took a step back, the urge to drive my fist into his face nearly overwhelming. My hand shook with it, every muscle coiled tight and screaming for violence.
But I couldn't do it, not yet. I needed to keep my head clear.
I turned without another word, yanking open the door so hard it rattled in the frame. The cold night air hit me like a slap, and I sucked in a breath, trying to steady my pulse. My vision blurred at the edges, dark and wavering, but I stumbled toward my truck, fingers fumbling with the keys.
Tom, wait, Jake called, voice raw and panicked. I didn't look back.
Just slid into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and peeled out of the lot, tires screaming against the asphalt.
The headlights cut through the darkness, stark and blinding, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking on the wheel. My head pounded, each breath jagged and uneven, and I couldn't think past the rage roaring in my skull. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark and still.
Emily's car was parked neatly in the garage, the porch light casting pale shadows across the lawn. I sat there for a long time, engine idling, fingers white-knuckled on the wheel. Eventually, I killed the engine and climbed out, the manila envelope clutched tight in one hand. The door creaked when I pushed it open, and the floorboards groaned beneath my boots as I stepped inside. Upstairs, I could hear the soft murmur of the TV, and my chest tightened, every breath a struggle. Emily's voice floated down the stairs, light and sweet, like nothing had changed.
But everything had. And by the time the sun rose, so would the truth. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, the manila envelope clutched so tight in my hand I could feel the papers inside crinkle and fold. Emily's voice drifted down the hall, soft and cheerful, the way it used to be when things were good. When I still believed in her. For a moment, I couldn't move. My legs felt rooted to the floor, my heart slamming against my ribs. I was a coward. I could face down a guy twice my size in a bar fight, could wrench bolts free and wrestle engines back to life, but I couldn't make my feet climb those stairs. I took a breath, slow and steady, trying to loosen the knot of anger and heartbreak lodged in my chest. Then I forced myself to move, one step at a time, the floorboards groaning under my boots. By the time I reached our bedroom door, my palms were slick with sweat. Emily was sprawled on the bed, one hand resting on her stomach, the TV flickering soft blue light across her face. Her eyes snapped to me the second I stepped inside, wide and startled. "Tom," she breathed, sitting up too quickly, her hand twitching to the remote to mute the show. "I didn't hear you come in. I thought you were." She broke off, eyes darting to the envelope in my hand, and the color drained from her cheeks. It was subtle, but I saw it, the way her fingers tightened on the quilt, her breath catching just enough to give her away. "I was out," I said evenly, shutting the door behind me. The lock clicked with a dull finality. "Needed some air." "Oh," she said, swallowing hard. "Okay. Are you hungry? I can make you something." "Sit down," I said, cutting her off. My voice came out flat and unfamiliar, but I couldn't help it. Couldn't let her twist this, couldn't let her smile and lie and pretend that everything was fine. She hesitated, teeth catching on her lip, but sank back onto the bed. Her hands trembled as she smoothed the hem of her dress, and my chest ached with the urge to touch her, to wrap her in my arms and pretend none of this was real. But I couldn't, not anymore. I crossed the room in 2 steps, dropping the envelope on the bedspread between us. It looked pathetic, small and crumpled, but Emily stared at it like it was a live grenade. "What's this?" she asked, her voice high and thin. "Open it," I said. She didn't move. Didn't blink. Her eyes flickered to mine, wide and pleading, but I just stared back, my face carved from stone. After a long moment, her hands crept forward, shaking so bad she could barely pry the flap open. The photos spilled out first. Her breath hitched, fingers frozen midair, eyes darting over the glossy prints. Each one a nail in the coffin, her car behind Jake's garage, her arms around his neck, his hands sliding under her dress. I watched her eyes flit back and forth, denial crumbling with every image. Her mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. By the time she got to the text messages, her face was chalk white, lips trembling. I saw the exact second her resolve shattered, her shoulders caved, and she buried her face in her hands, a choked sob wrenching from her throat. "Tom," she gasped, words muffled by her palms. "Oh God, I can explain, Explain?" I echoed, my voice flat and hollow. "Go ahead. Explain." She sobbed harder, fingers digging into her scalp, shoulders shaking. "It wasn't, I didn't mean for it to happen, I swear. It just, Jake was there, and you were always working, and I was lonely, and..." "Lonely?" I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "You were lonely, so you decided to crawl into bed with my best friend? Was that supposed to fix things?" She flinched like I'd slapped her, face crumpling. "No, I know it was wrong. I felt so alone, and Jake, he..." "Don't," I snapped, the word coming out a growl. "Don't say his name. Don't try to blame this on me." Her hands fell away from her face, eyes red and raw, mascara smudged in dark streaks down her cheeks. For a second, she just stared at me, breath hitching, guilt and shame twisting across her face. "It was a mistake," she whispered, voice splintering. "It didn't mean anything, Tom, I swear. I love you, Love?" I barked, and the laugh that tore from my chest was raw and broken. "You call that love? Sneaking around for a year, lying to my face, do you even hear yourself?" She flinched again, hands twisting in the quilt, tears streaking down her face. For a moment, neither of us spoke, the silence so thick it felt suffocating. Then she lunged forward, hands clutching my sleeve, eyes wide and desperate. "Please," she gasped, voice cracking. "Tom, please, we can fix this. I'll do anything, I'll quit my job, I'll go to counseling, please don't leave me, please." I yanked my arm free, the motion so violent she nearly fell off the bed. Her eyes went wider, horror bleeding across her face. "It's a little late for that," I bit out, voice shaking. "You should have thought about that before you spread your legs for him." The words came out crueler than I intended, but I didn't regret them. I wanted her to hurt, to feel the agony twisting in my chest, to understand what she'd torn apart. Her face crumpled, a fresh sob wrenching from her throat, and she buried her face in her hands, shoulders racked with grief. I couldn't look at her. Couldn't stand the sight of her in our bed, sobbing like the victim, mascara smeared and hair tangled from the hands of another man. I turned on my heel, fingers trembling so bad I could barely twist the doorknob. "Tom," she choked, voice broken and raw. "Wait, please, I love you." I didn't look back. Just ripped the door open, stormed down the stairs, and grabbed my keys off the counter. The door slammed behind me, cutting off her sobs, and I stumbled to my truck, hands shaking so bad I dropped the keys twice before jamming them into the ignition. By the time I pulled out of the driveway, my vision was blurred with rage and grief, headlights slicing through the darkness. The steering wheel groaned under my grip, and I couldn't breathe past the lump lodged in my throat. I drove until the streetlights faded and the highway stretched wide and empty before me, the engine rumbling low and steady beneath me. Only then did I pull over on the shoulder, hands still clenched tight, and let the screams tear free. The night swallowed the sound, dark and endless, and I screamed until my voice was raw and my hands bled, clutching the wheel until my knuckles ached. Until the grief hollowed me out, leaving nothing but rage and a single, bitter truth. There was no fixing this. I don't remember much of that night, only that I drove until the gas gauge dipped low and the road blurred into black and endless lines.
The sun was clawing its way over the horizon by the time I found myself parked on the edge of Pine Lake, the old wooden pier stretching out into mist and glassy water. It was a place I used to go when the world got too loud, before Emily, before the shop, before everything. The wind coming off the lake was cold enough to bite, but I barely felt it. I sat on the tailgate of my truck, staring out over the water, the air damp with pine and frost, and tried to remember how to breathe. My throat ached raw from screaming, hands throbbing where my nails had bit deep into my palms. Blood dried in rusty flakes on my knuckles. I couldn't remember hitting anything. When my phone buzzed, I almost didn't answer. But then I saw Mike's name flash on the screen and picked up, voice hoarse. "Tom," he said, the worry thick in his voice. "Where the hell are you? Emily's been calling me all night. She said you're not picking up, that you just left." "I know," I muttered, staring out at the fog creeping low over the lake. My voice was brittle and hollow, a ghost of itself. "You okay?" Mike asked, like he didn't already know the answer. I almost laughed. "Not really." He blew out a breath, static crackling down the line. "Listen, man, I get it. I do. But don't do anything stupid, all right? We can figure this out. Just come back in." "I can't," I said, and the words tore out of me, ragged and raw. My hand shook so bad I nearly dropped the phone. "I can't go back there, Mike." "Not after," my voice broke, splintering on the words, and I clamped my mouth shut, staring at the way my breath fogged in the cold. Silence stretched long and heavy between us, only the low crackle of static and Mike's slow, steady breathing. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Look, Tom. Maybe you just need some time, all right? Just think it through. Don't make any decisions while you're like this." "Already have," I muttered, wiping a shaking hand over my mouth. My eyes burned, gritty with exhaustion. "Called a lawyer this morning. Meeting him tomorrow." Mike was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and resigned. "You sure about that?" "Yeah," I rasped. The word scraped my throat raw. "It's over." A soft curse hissed down the line, followed by a heavy sigh. "All right," Mike said finally, the words slow and reluctant. "All right, man. I'm here if you need me. Just don't do anything you can't take back." "I won't," I said, but we both knew it was a lie. By the time I pulled back into the driveway, the sun was high and harsh, slanting through the windshield in blinding streaks. I killed the engine and sat there for a long moment, fingers clenched wide around the wheel, staring at the house, the front porch with the peeling paint, the flower beds Emily had planted last spring, the welcome mat that suddenly felt like a cruel joke. She was waiting for me by the window, curtains twitching back just enough to show her face, eyes wide and red-rimmed. The second she saw me, the door flew open, and she was stumbling out, barefoot and pale, her hair tangled and eyes swollen. "Tom," she gasped, running down the steps, voice cracking. Oh God, I was so scared, I thought. I flinched when she reached for me, her fingers cold and trembling on my arm. I jerked back instinctively, the motion sharp and violent. Her hand dropped, eyes going wide and wounded. "You left," she whispered, voice breaking. "You just drove off. I thought I didn't know if you were coming back." "Neither did I said flatly, stepping around her, boots crunching over gravel. "Wait," she pleaded, grabbing my sleeve, her voice high and desperate. "Please, Tom, just listen, please, I can explain, I can." "Don't," I snapped, wrenching free. The word cracked between us like a whip. She flinched, tears spilling over, shoulders curling in on themselves. I forced myself to look away, throat tight and aching. She trailed me inside, words tumbling over themselves, excuses and apologies and empty promises, all of them ringing hollow. I couldn't listen, couldn't look at her without seeing Jake's hands on her hips, her fingers tangled in his shirt, that stupid grin stretched wide across his face. My stomach twisted, while burning at the back of my throat. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, hands fisted in my shirt, voice splintering. "God, Tom, I'm so sorry, I never meant to hurt you, I just needed." "You needed him?" I snarled, teeth gritting, and the way her face crumpled should have made me feel better. But it didn't. It just made the anger burn hotter, cruel, and blistering. You could have come to me, Emily. You could have talked to me, but you didn't. You chose to lie, to sneak around like a coward. Her knees buckled, and she crumpled at my feet, sobbing into her hands, shoulders shaking with it. I stared down at her, chest heaving, fury and heartbreak twisting tight and vicious, until I couldn't breathe past the bitterness clogging my throat. I love you, she choked, voice muffled and desperate. Please, Tom, please, I love you. I never stopped, I just. Stop, I rasped, the word raw and shaking. I squeezed my eyes shut, scrubbing a hand over my face. Just stop. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Her sobs quieted to broken gasps, hands still clutched in the hem of my shirt, knuckles white. I stared at the floor, at her tear-streaked face, at the photographs scattered across the carpet, the truth laid bare between us, ugly and undeniable. I'm filing for divorce, I said finally, voice flat and dead. The words felt heavy and final, a door slamming shut. Her breath hitched, eyes going wide and horrified, but I couldn't stop. It's over, Emily. She shook her head, eyes wild and desperate, hands scrabbling for mine. No, please, Tom, don't do this, please, I love you, I can fix this, I swear, just. It's too late, I whispered, the words cracking on the last syllable. Her scream was raw and anguished, and when she crumpled to the floor, hands clutched in her hair, I had to turn away, teeth gritted, eyes burning. My hands trembled, grief and rage hollowing me out, leaving nothing but a dull, throbbing ache. I walked out without looking back, the door swinging shut behind me, and when her sobs faded into silence, I sank to my knees on the porch, head in my hands, and let the tears come, hot and bitter and endless. The sun dipped low, shadows stretching long and dark across the lawn, and I sat there, clutching my chest, trying to breathe past the emptiness. Trying to remember who I was without her.